In Burkina Faso, there was a secret everyone knew. President Ibrahim Traoré wasn't really Ibrahim Traoré. The real leader had been severely wounded in an assassination attempt 2 months ago and was secretly receiving treatment. The person, appearing before the public, giving speeches and making decisions, was a body double who looked exactly like him. But one day, the double made an unexpected decision. He refused to be just a shadow anymore. The night was thick with heat and tension, as Dr. Amina Konate made her way through the hidden underground passage beneath the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. The passage, a relic from French colonial times, had been sealed for decades, until 2 months ago when it became the only safe route to the most closely guarded secret in Burkina Faso. At the end of the tunnel, 2 elite guards checked her credentials before allowing her through the reinforced door. Inside was a medical facility that officially didn't exist, and within it, a patient who officially wasn't there. "How is he today?" Dr. Konate asked the night nurse. "Improving, but slowly," the nurse replied. "The fever has subsided, but the wounds are still causing significant pain." Dr. Konate nodded and entered the private room. There, propped up on pillows and surrounded by medical equipment, was Ibrahim Traoré, the real Ibrahim Traoré. His face was gaunt, his normally robust frame diminished by weeks of fighting infection and blood loss. 3 bullet wounds from the assassination attempt had nearly claimed his life. Only the quick thinking of his security detail and the skills of Dr. Konate had saved him. "Good evening, Mr. President," she said, keeping her voice professional, despite their long friendship. They had been classmates at university before their paths diverged. Hers to medicine, his to the military, and eventually national leadership. Amina. Traoré's voice was stronger than yesterday, a good sign. "Any news from the outside world?" "Your double is performing admirably," she said, checking his vital signs. Colonel Dio addressed the African Union Summit yesterday. The speech was well received. A complex expression crossed Traoré's face. Pride, relief, but also something else. Concern, perhaps even jealousy. And the public. "Do they suspect anything?" Dr. Konate hesitated. "There are rumors, of course. Your sudden change in handedness didn't go unnoticed. Dio is right-handed while you favor your left, and he doesn't have your scar from the Kaya campaign. But people accept him as me?" "Yes," she replied. "They want to believe. And Colonel Dio has been well prepared." This was an understatement. Colonel Dio had been Traoré's friend since military academy. They had similar builds, similar features, and with the right haircut and the signature red beret, the resemblance was striking. For 2 months, Dio had studied Traoré's speeches, mannerisms, and decision-making patterns. The inner circle of government officials who knew the truth was small, just 5 people, including Dr. Konate. "The council meeting is tomorrow," Traoré said, shifting painfully. "Dio will need to decide on the Chinese infrastructure proposal. He's been briefed on your position," Dr. Konate assured him. Traoré's eyes narrowed. "And does he agree with my position?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the growing concern. For weeks, Traoré had been sending instructions through Dr. Konate to his double. But recently Colonel Dio had begun asking more questions, suggesting alternatives, sometimes even delaying decisions. "I believe he will represent your interests," she said carefully. Traoré studied her face. "You don't sound convinced." Before she could respond, Security Chief Ouedraogo entered the room, his expression grave. "Mr. President, we have a situation. Colonel Dio has scheduled a meeting with the French ambassador tomorrow. It wasn't on your approved agenda." Traoré's face darkened. "Did he say why?" "No, sir. The meeting was arranged directly, bypassing the usual protocols." Traoré exchanged glances with Dr. Konate. France had been Burkina Faso's colonial ruler until 1960, and relations had been strained since Traoré's government asked French troops to leave the country last year. Any unscheduled meeting with the French ambassador was significant, potentially dangerous. "I need to speak with Dio immediately," Traoré said, attempting to sit up straighter and wincing from the pain. "Sir, he's attending the military graduation ceremony this evening," Ouedraogo replied. "He won't be back until late." Traoré's jaw clenched. "Then bring me the secure phone. I'll call him directly." As Ouedraogo left to retrieve the phone, Dr. Konate checked Traoré's bandages. "You're not strong enough for confrontation," she warned quietly. "I don't have a choice," Traoré replied. "The assassination attempt was just the beginning. If I lose control now, everything we fought for will be at risk." Neither of them voiced the growing fear that Colonel Dio might be starting to enjoy his role as president a little too much. One in the president's uniform, the other in civilian clothes, weakened but radiating authority. Dr. Konate helped Traoré to a chair, while Security Chief Ouedraogo stood uncomfortably by the door, his loyalty divided. "It wasn't betrayal," Dio said finally. "I was trying to protect our people by selling out to the French." Traoré's contempt was palpable. "By undoing everything we fought for." "By being realistic," Dio countered. "While you've been here creating an ideologically pure Burkina Faso in your mind, I've been out there dealing with the actual Burkina Faso, with terrorism, poverty, and international pressure." "So your solution is capitulation? Giving the French back their mining rights? Letting their military return?" "My solution is pragmatism," Dio insisted. "We need allies, Ibrahim. We need intelligence. We need economic partnerships. Not at the expense of our sovereignty." Traoré leaned forward, wincing from the movement. "That's what this has always been about, true independence. Not just on paper, but in reality." Dio paced the office, frustration building. "Independence means nothing if our people are being killed by terrorists, if our economy collapses, if we're isolated internationally." "And what did the French offer you personally?" Traoré asked quietly. "To stay in power, perhaps. To remain Ibrahim Traoré indefinitely?" The question hung in the air. Dio stopped pacing. "They know, don't they?" Traoré continued. "Marchand and Le, they figured out you're not me." Dio's silence was confirmation enough. "What did they promise you?" Traoré pressed. "Nothing explicit," Dio admitted finally. "But the implication was clear. They would support a transition of power if I proved more cooperative than you." Dr. Konate looked between the two men, understanding the full danger of the situation. "Now they're trying to exploit the deception we created to essentially engineer a silent coup." "It's not a coup if the people don't know the difference," Ouedraogo said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "The public still believes Colonel Dio is President Traoré. They've accepted his leadership. For 2 months, if the real President Traoré were to not recover from his injuries, nothing would change from the public's perspective." The implication was chilling. Traoré stared at his security chief, a man he had trusted with his life. "Are you threatening me, Emmanuel?" Ouedraogo didn't flinch. "I'm describing reality, sir. Colonel Dio has been effectively leading the country. Several ministers prefer his more moderate approach. The transition could be seamless." "And what happens to me in this scenario?" Traoré asked, his voice dangerously quiet. No one answered. They didn't need to. The options were clear: permanent seclusion, exile, or worse. Dr. Konate moved closer to Traoré, her posture protective. "This is madness. You're talking about removing the legitimate president, the man the people elected." "The people elected a vision," Dio argued. "A vision for a stronger, more independent Burkina Faso. I share that vision. I just disagree on how to achieve it." Traoré studied his old friend, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. "You've always been the compromiser, Youf. Always looking for the middle path. But some things cannot be compromised. Our sovereignty, our dignity, our right to determine our own future without foreign interference." "Pretty words," Dio replied. "But they don't stop terrorists. They don't feed hungry children. They don't build hospitals." The tension in the room was broken by a knock at the door. Foreign Minister Zeta entered, then stopped short, seeing both. "Traoré and Dio." "Mr. President," he said uncertainly, looking between them. "The press is assembled for your statement on the Chinese infrastructure deal. They're waiting in the garden." This was the scheduled press conference that Dio had been preparing for all morning. Over 50 journalists, both domestic and international, were gathered just outside. Traoré and Dio looked at each other, both understanding the significance of the moment. Whoever addressed that press conference would be recognized as the legitimate leader of Burkina Faso. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, Dio said. "No," Traoré countermanded. "Tell them the president needs 10 minutes. Zeta looked desperately to Ouedraogo, who remained impassive, then to Dr. Konate, who simply raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps," Dr. Konate suggested quietly, "this is a decision the Burkinabe people should make. The truth has a power of its own." A long silence followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, Dio nodded. "She's right," he said. "We both address the press. We tell them everything, the assassination attempt, my role as your double, the French pressure. We let the people decide which path they want for Burkina Faso." Traoré looked skeptical. "And if they choose your path of compromise? Then I'll serve as your loyal advisor, arguing my position through proper channels," Dio promised. "And if they reaffirm your vision of uncompromising independence?" Traoré considered this. It was a gamble. His physical weakness would be obvious to everyone. The revelation of the deception could undermine public trust. But the alternative was an internal power struggle that would weaken the country, regardless of who won. "Agreed," he said finally. "The truth, all of it." As Dr. Konate helped Traoré to his feet, Dio removed the red beret that had become Traoré's signature. He handed it to its rightful owner with a formal nod. "Whatever happens next," Dio said, "it was an honor to be you for a time." Traoré accepted the beret, placing it on his head with a grimace of pain. "And it was a reminder of who I must be. Seeing, you become what I could have been." Side by side, the real president and his double walked slowly toward the garden, where the press waited, unaware that they were about to witness one of the most extraordinary political revelations in African history. The press conference lasted over 2 hours. It began with gasps of shock as both Ibrahim Traoré and his double appeared together, followed by a stunned silence as Traoré revealed the assassination attempt, his near-fatal injuries, and the decision to use Colonel Dio as his stand-in during recovery. The journalists' questions came rapid fire. Who knew about the deception? Who was behind the assassination attempt? Had any of Colonel Dio's decisions as President Traoré been against the real president's wishes? With remarkable transparency, both men answered every question. Traoré confirmed that the assassination had likely been orchestrated by foreign interests unhappy with his resource nationalism policies, though investigations were ongoing. He acknowledged the meeting with the French ambassador that morning and the intelligence for mining rights offer. "This is exactly the kind of pressure that has kept African nations dependent for decades," Traoré told the assembled press. "The choice facing Burkina Faso, facing all of Africa, is whether we continue to allow our policies to be dictated by outside interests, or whether we chart our own course, even when that path is difficult." Colonel Dio spoke as well, explaining his gradual shift from merely implementing Traoré's directives to developing his own approach. "I believed then and still believe that some compromise is necessary," he said candidly. "Not compromise on our ultimate goals of sovereignty and prosperity, but on the means and timeline for achieving them." The revelation dominated global headlines for days. "Two presidents, Burkina Faso's extraordinary deception," read the BBC. "Double identity crisis rocks West African nation," proclaimed Al Jazeera. Social media exploded with memes and serious political debates alike. The French government issued a carefully worded statement denying any involvement in the assassination attempt, and characterizing the meeting with Dio as routine diplomatic engagement. Few believed them, especially after a whistleblower leaked documents suggesting French intelligence had indeed known about the double deception. Within Burkina Faso, public reaction was mixed, but trended strongly toward support for Traoré. His willingness to reveal the truth, despite the personal and political risks, reinforced his image as a leader of integrity. Street demonstrations in Ouagadougou featured signs reading, "One Traoré is enough," and "No compromise on sovereignty." 2 weeks after the revelation, Ibrahim Traoré, still recovering but now appearing publicly in a wheelchair when necessary, addressed the nation again. This time he announced a new government structure, with Colonel Dio appointed as his official deputy and advisor for national security. "Our strength lies not in uniformity of thought, but in unity of purpose," Traoré explained. "Colonel Dio and I have different approaches, but we share the same goal: a strong, independent Burkina Faso that determines its own future." The masked leader affair, as it came to be known, fundamentally altered Burkina Faso's relationship with France and other Western powers. The public exposure of their pressure tactics made it politically impossible for them to continue the same approach. Instead, new negotiations began on more equal terms, with transparency as a non-negotiable condition. The assassination attempt was eventually traced to a coalition of foreign intelligence operatives and corporate interests connected to the mining industry. Several arrests were made, though the highest-level orchestrators remained beyond reach. As for Ibrahim Traoré and Youf Dio, their relationship evolved into a unique political partnership. Their public disagreements became a feature, not a bug, of Burkina Faso's governance, a demonstration that robust debate and diverse perspectives could strengthen rather than weaken leadership. 6 months after the revelation, as Traoré finally regained his full physical strength, he and Dio stood together on the balcony of the presidential palace, watching a military parade celebrate.